In this episode, we're going to broaden the lens from metadata to the full set of ways credentials leak in cloud environments, especially through workloads, machine images, and build pipelines. Beginners often picture credential theft as someone guessing a password, but cloud incidents frequently start with something much more mundane: a secret left in the wrong place, copied into the wrong artifact, or logged where it should never have been. These exposures are dangerous because they create ready-to-use access without requiring advanced exploitation, and they can persist quietly until someone finds them. The exam will often describe a scenario that includes a small detail about how a system is built or deployed, and your job is to notice that the detail is actually a credential exposure path. We'll build a mental map of those paths and focus on how to recognize them, why they occur, and what makes them high impact. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. First, let's define what we mean by credentials in this context, because the word covers more than usernames and passwords. Credentials include access keys, tokens, session identifiers, certificates, and any secret material that can be used to authenticate or authorize actions. Some credentials are long-lived and act like permanent keys, while others are short-lived and expire quickly, but both can be valuable to attackers if they can be used during the window of validity. Credentials also vary in scope, meaning what they can do, and scope often matters more than lifetime. A short-lived credential with broad permissions can cause serious damage quickly, while a long-lived credential with narrow permissions might be inconvenient but not catastrophic. When you evaluate exposure paths, always pair the question of where the credential leaked with the question of what the credential can do. Workloads are a major source of credential exposure because they are where code runs, where configuration is read, and where secrets are often handled. The simplest exposure path is hard-coding credentials in application code or configuration files that ship with the workload. Developers sometimes do this for convenience during testing and then forget to remove it, or they copy patterns forward because the application works and nobody revisits the decision. Another workload exposure path is placing credentials in environment variables without sufficient protection, which can be risky if the environment variables can be dumped through debugging features, crash reports, or accidental logging. Workloads can also leak credentials through error messages or stack traces, especially if a failure prints configuration values. The key exam-ready lesson is that any place a workload can store or display configuration might become an exposure channel if secrets are not handled deliberately. Logging is a particularly sneaky workload exposure path because logs are often treated as harmless text, but they can become a durable secret repository if not controlled. Applications sometimes log full request headers, full connection strings, or full error objects that include secret values. Operations teams might enable verbose debugging logs during an outage, capture sensitive values, and then forget to turn the verbosity back down. Logs also tend to be centralized, shared, and retained, which means a secret in logs can spread to many systems and many people. The risk multiplies because log access is often broader than production access, especially in organizations where many teams can view logs for troubleshooting. When you see a scenario where detailed logging is enabled or where logs are accessible widely, consider whether credentials could be present, even if no one intended them to be. Another workload exposure path comes from the way workloads retrieve credentials at runtime. Even if you avoid storing long-term keys, workloads can still obtain tokens through internal mechanisms, such as metadata services or internal secret retrieval calls. If an attacker compromises the workload, the attacker can often access those tokens in memory or can trigger the workload to retrieve them again. This is why compromise of a workload is so serious in cloud. The workload is the place where secrets are used, so it becomes the place where secrets can be stolen. A common misconception is that removing secrets from disk makes a workload safe, but a compromised process can still see what it needs to operate. The security goal is not only to avoid storage exposure, but also to limit what the workload can obtain and to constrain what any obtained credential can do. That is the bridge between credential hygiene and least privilege. Now let's talk about machine images, because images are a classic place where secrets get baked in and then replicated widely. An image is meant to be a reusable template for building many instances, and that reusability is exactly what makes secrets inside images so dangerous. If a credential is embedded in an image, then every workload created from that image may carry the credential, and the credential can persist even after teams think they rotated or deleted it elsewhere. Images can contain secrets in obvious places, like configuration files, but they can also contain secrets in less obvious places, like shell history, cached files, temporary directories, or leftover build artifacts. Beginners sometimes assume images are clean because they come from an automated process, but automation can reproduce mistakes perfectly. When you see a scenario involving custom images or golden images, you should immediately ask whether image hygiene processes exist to remove secrets and verify cleanliness. The image problem also includes base images and third-party images, not just images your organization builds. Using an untrusted or poorly maintained image can introduce hidden credentials, backdoors, or insecure defaults that create indirect credential exposure. Even without malicious intent, an image might contain sample keys, default accounts, or insecure configuration patterns that encourage teams to store secrets in unsafe ways. Images can also create exposure by including tools or agents that collect diagnostics and accidentally capture secrets. The exam may not require you to name specific image repositories, but it will reward you for recognizing that image provenance and image scanning are important because images are the foundation of many workloads. A single compromised or careless image can become the seed of many future compromises. The safest posture treats images as controlled software artifacts that must meet security standards before they are used at scale. Build pipelines are another major credential exposure source because pipelines are where code is assembled, tested, and packaged, and they often need access to cloud resources. Pipelines might need to pull dependencies, access artifact storage, push containers, or deploy infrastructure, which means pipelines often hold credentials that can do powerful actions. If pipeline secrets are stored insecurely, exposed in build logs, or accessible to too many users, attackers can steal them and gain strong access without touching production workloads. Pipelines also run automation, and automation identities are sometimes given broad permissions for convenience, which increases impact when exposed. A common gap is treating the build system as a developer convenience tool rather than as a high-value security boundary. If an attacker compromises a pipeline, the attacker can often modify the software you deploy, turning credential exposure into a supply chain problem. One of the most common pipeline exposure paths is secrets in source control, where a developer accidentally commits an access key or token into a repository. This happens because developers copy credentials into configuration files to test something quickly, or because they misunderstand how configuration should be injected. Once the secret is in a repository, it may be copied into many clones, indexed by search systems, and preserved in history even if removed later. Another pipeline exposure path is printing secrets during build steps, such as echoing environment variables or outputting configuration during debugging. Build logs can be accessible to many people, and they can be retained for long periods, so a secret printed once can live for a long time. A third path is insecure secret distribution, where secrets are passed between build steps in ways that are easy to intercept or read. When you see a scenario where debugging is enabled or where build logs are widely accessible, your credential exposure alarms should go off. Pipeline exposure also includes how build agents and runners are secured, because those machines execute the pipeline and often have access to secret material. If build agents are shared, poorly isolated, or accessible to untrusted users, then secrets can leak through the environment. For example, a malicious build job could read environment variables or cached files if isolation is weak. A compromised build agent can also alter the pipeline outputs, injecting malicious code into images or packages. Even if the pipeline configuration is secure on paper, a weak build execution environment can undermine it. The common mental model is that the pipeline is a privileged workload, and privileged workloads require stronger controls, stronger monitoring, and tighter access. If a scenario treats the pipeline as casual, it is likely hiding risk. Credential exposure paths also include the human workflows around deployment, because humans sometimes move secrets through insecure channels when they are under time pressure. Developers might paste tokens into chat, store them in personal notes, or email configuration files. Teams might share a single access key among many people because it is easy, and that creates an accountability and rotation nightmare. While the episode title focuses on workloads, images, and pipelines, it is useful to remember that these systems are built and operated by people, and people create shortcuts when they feel blocked. Those shortcuts often become exposure paths because secrets move into places that were never designed to hold them securely. A mature security posture supports safe workflows, so people do not feel forced into risky workarounds. On the exam, scenarios that mention shared keys, manual distribution, or unclear ownership often imply exposure risk. To bring this together into an exam-ready recognition skill, you want to listen for artifacts and flows. Workload artifacts include configuration files, environment variables, memory, and logs. Image artifacts include baked-in files, cached content, build leftovers, and the provenance of the base image. Pipeline artifacts include repository history, build logs, secret injection mechanisms, and the permissions of the pipeline identity. Exposure often happens when a secret crosses a boundary into an artifact that is widely accessible, long-retained, or difficult to purge. If a secret enters a log, a repository history, or a reusable image, it tends to persist and spread. If a secret is stored in a place with broad read access, it becomes an easy target. When you can spot boundaries and artifacts, you can spot exposure paths. As we close, credential exposure in cloud environments often comes from ordinary choices that become dangerous at scale, especially in workloads, images, and build pipelines. Workloads can leak secrets through hard coding, environment variables, verbose logging, and compromised runtime access. Images can bake secrets into templates that replicate across many instances, and third-party images can introduce hidden credentials or unsafe defaults. Build pipelines can expose secrets through source control mistakes, log output, insecure secret handling, and overprivileged automation identities, turning the pipeline into a high-value target. The calm, defensible approach is to treat secrets as hazardous material that must be handled with strict boundaries, minimal scope, and strong visibility. When you can identify where secrets might leak and how those leaks would be exploited, you can choose safer designs, and you can recognize the risk signals quickly in exam scenarios.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.